What's up, everybody? Welcome to the PickSix podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. I'm back from vacation, and it's Tuesday, July 6th. And we're going to do some coach rankings. Joining me to do so, the man who hosted yesterday's podcast, John Breech, included with his interview with Lee Johnson. Tom Brady's oldest teammate. Also joining me, Cody Benjamin. What's up, guys? John, tell me. Give it a little fill-in on the Lee Johnson podcast.
Everyone who didn't listen, go listen to it now. He is Tom Brady's oldest teammate. The guy was drafted in 1985, which is just mind-boggling to think that Tom Brady has an ex-teammate who was drafted 36 years ago. Like, try and wrap your head around that and the fact that Brady's still playing. Lee Johnson was 40 when he was Brady's teammate during Brady's rookie year. And he is the reason Tom Brady wears the number 12. You will have to listen to the podcast to find out why. Now, Cody.
Well, I started listening to this podcast and I learned in the first 30 seconds that this guy babysat John Breech. And so that's another reason you should be going to listen to it. And I am honored to be part of the welcome back crew for Will Brinson coming off vacation. So yeah, pleasure to be here.
And I mean, in full disclosure, Breech probably here because Debo wasn't sure if I would actually return from vacation.
There was literally a 70% chance Brinson wasn't going to show up off his vacation, and Debo didn't want Cody stuck by himself doing these coaching rankings. He said, "Breech, please show up. We don't know what's happening with Brinson."
I've actually been back in town for several days. We just ran it through the 4th of July, but our rental was only through Saturday. We bounced on Friday because we had to come get a dog. Nobody cares about this information. I don't know how to tell you. Let's get to the coach rankings. You didn't just do top 10 coaches, Cody. You ranked all 32 coaches. You can go read it at cbssports.com right now. Could you give us your criteria for these rankings? I mean, one would presume best coaches. Here's how I rank them. But, you got to weave in there a bunch of new coaches, guys who are unproven, guys have Super Bowls. How do you weigh all that?
Yeah, it was kind of similar to we've talked. Rankings every single day this summer it seems like, and so a little bit like the quarterbacks. I'm trying not to look at just past performance, but also future outlook. And so, it's easy to make it kind of. I put it in the intro there, like a legends list. I mean, if you're doing that all time, there's no question. I think that Bill Belichick is number one, and so forth. And yet, I kind of wanted to look at what they have going for them moving forward too. And so, I guess the best way to look at it is kind of like if you were to draft any coach for this season. And again, just like it's hard to separate quarterbacks from their team situations, it's hard to do that with coaches too. But I tried to do it. I don't think I did it perfectly, but I think that it was because you got a ton of first-year coaches where, are you going to slot them in above guys that have been in the NFL for 10 years or not? But definitely it was the story that got the most blowback by far this year. So that was good. Yeah, more than the quarterbacks for sure.
Cody's a celebrity. Let me just tell you this. I'm minding my own business. Like, I have an off day last week. Or maybe it was, I don't remember when it was, or I was done working. All of a sudden, I hear Cody's name pop up on the Colin Cowherd show.
Oh, yeah.
They're talking about
his coaching rankings. Let me correct that, though. He never gave me a name drop. He just called me the CBS intern who's since been fired. And neither of those are true. I thought about asking him, would you have me on because you made a mistake? But yeah, I think Pro Football Talk picked it up, but very few name drops. So I'm not as big of a celebrity as
but I knew who he was talking about. That's what, in my head, I was thinking, that's right. Cody's story. They're talking about Cody's story.
Right.
And Brinson, the funny thing about Cowherd talking about it is that, and this is something we talk about all the time whenever we do rankings, is that if you want to pull someone, if you say, hey, this person got snubbed on the top 10 list and you want to put them on the top 10, then you have to pull someone out of that top 10. You can't just add a person because then you have 11 in your top 10. It doesn't work. And Cowherd couldn't do that. He was like, well, Kyle Shanahan deserves to be up there, but then he couldn't decide on who should have been replaced. And so maybe that's what we'll do. We'll figure that out. Who knows? But it was pretty interesting to listen to.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest struggle for me in these coach rankings, and this is where we got into this. This is how Sean Wagner McGuff got fired from CBS, is he ranked Doug Peterson too low, essentially. And
full circle.
Yeah. Exactly, it's all full circle. It's tough though. Like, what do you do? So Mike Tomlin, for instance, and we'll get to the full rankings, but I just think Mike Tomlin's a good example. Mike Tomlin has 2 Super Bowl wins. those have to count for something. He's never had a season below 500. And yet I think there are some names that you have below Mike Tomlin that I would take over him. And you know what I mean? It's just hard once a guy has won a Super Bowl, particularly one in the last couple of years, it's hard to like push him down. Like Pete Carroll is a guy that people don't like as a coach right now just because they think he's too old school and runs the football and doesn't want to let Russ cook, but he's got a Super Bowl and the Seahawks don't win 9+ games every year. So it's hard to rank those guys. And then you mentioned all the younger guys. It's hard to, we don't know anything about Joe Judge right now. I mean,
well, Giants fans, they'll tell you they do.
I bet they're used to that, right?
But no, I think the best way to look at it's totally subjective. That's what these rankings are for. But I guess the best way to look at it, if you're really upset over something, is like, where are they in terms of if you were to look at it in quadrants, there's the top, or just thirds, whatever. Are you in the top third, the middle third, or the bottom third? And most of the guys in the bottom third they haven't had a chance to prove themselves yet. But if you've got a coach who's been around for several years, is he a top 10 coach? Is he a top 12 coach or not? And it's kind of, I think that's an easier way to say, you can nitpick whether your favorite coach is 17th instead of, 15th. But I think the bigger picture thing is looking at which coaches are capable of leading you to a Super Bowl. And I think that there is a line there somewhere where these kind of become good coaches instead of great coaches.
I kind of like that idea. Here's how we're ranking them based on what you would want. If you were just given any random, you're gonna be placed in the lottery thing they do for the NBA draft, right? And they're just gonna spit out a ping pong ball with a random NFL team on it. And that's the team that your fate is decided on. Here, how would you rank the coaches you want them? It's not you get Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. It's, you know what I mean?
Or if you had two exactly evenly matched teams playing a game tomorrow, which coach would you put in charge? Is Belichick beating Andy Reid if they have the exact same talent on the field?
Yeah, I like that. I think that's good. So let's get to the rankings, and we'll start at the bottom because that's how this works.
Oh boy.
And because we want to troll John Breech since his coach resides down here. Zach Taylor coming in.
I'm sorry.
30th. So I'm going to read through 23 through 32. And again, there's a lot of these guys are first-year head coaches. I'll be curious. All right, I'll read them really quickly. 23, Mike McCarthy. 24, Brandon Staley. 25, Vic Fangio. 26, Joe Judge. 27, Nick Sirianni. 28, Urban Meyer. 29, Robert Saleh. 30, Zach Taylor. 31, Dan Campbell. 32, David Culley. I'm going to assume that people who listen to this podcast don't need me to tell them what teams those guys are for. Does that seem fair? Or should we?
I would think if you're listening to a daily NFL, I don't know.
All right, David Culley's the new coach of the Texans. Dan Campbell's the new coach of the Lions. Zach Taylor's been with the Bengals. Saleh, new coach of the Jets. Urban, new coach of the Jaguars. Sirianni, new coach of the Eagles. Joe Judge, Giants. Fangio, Broncos. Staley, new coach of the Chargers. And Mike McCarthy, second-year coach of the Cowboys. Of that list of guys, Cody, you kind of hinted at it, so I guess that's the answer. What fan base was most mad at their coach being situated in this bottom tier?
Yeah, it was definitely Giants fans. I didn't get any pushback from Cowboys fans really about Mike McCarthy.
Mike McCarthy's too high.
And that's hilarious. That's how much Cowboys fans hate their coach, that if you didn't get blowback from them, they're on your side. That's nuts.
Well, because there is an admitted Philly bias here. And so if Cowboys fans wanted to come after it for that, they could. But I didn't really hear much about that. Yeah, I think it was the Giants. And I specifically, it was the wording I think I used in there because I talked about how, Joe Judge's mentality or the way he kind of carries himself like a tough guy. And he may be that. That's just his style. That's a genuine personality trait that he has, this no nonsense kind of coming from the Bill Belichick school. But yeah, I think that they maybe took issue with a little just poking fun at that a little bit. But he is I think that there's no way to properly assess how Joe Judge is as a coach right now.
Yeah.
6-10. He did a big he's done some impassioned speeches about the Eagles not getting his team into the playoffs and getting his guys. I don't know. I just think that there was pushback there, but I'm not a Joe Judge. I'm not anti Joe Judge. It's just that I'm not necessarily taking him over Brandon Staley right now. I mean, I think so many of these guys, like in this bottom tier, I don't know that there's that much value in like nitpicking from 23 to 32 because so many of these guys are just unproven.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I would, again, this is a subjective list. We're talking about who would you take? I would move Joe Judge. I would move Brandon Staley to 23 and Joe Judge to 24. And I can see why Giants fans are mad. They're like, he's won, at least been here. He's won 6 games. He nearly made the playoffs in the worst division in the history of football. But, then Nick Mullins screwed him. Or who was it? Who's your guy for the Eagles that they came in? And
Nate Sudfeld.
Yeah, Nate Sudfeld. That's it. Yeah, Nate.
But I just mean, that doesn't need to be rehashed. But I think like if that's the sticking point, like he did fine as a first-year head coach, but he's got a lot to prove yet, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And that's and in so many of these cases, not so much maybe in this category, but where there was a close call. This is just me now. I tend to lean to the offensive, like the guys who are on that side of the ball. And so that's just, that's my preference. And he's got to prove some things on that side of the ball.
Breech.
Just to tell you how subjective. Well, you want to ask me?
No, go ahead.
Yes, Taylor.
I was going to ask you about Zach Taylor. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to tell you how subjective this is, though, Brinson just said, hey, Brandon Staley's at 24. Brinson would move him up to 23. I would actually move him back. So we have 3 kind of differing opinions here. My thing on Brandon Staley is that, he was the defensive coordinator of a Rams defense. It was arguably one of the most talented defenses from a player's perspective. So he walked into, the cupboard was full when he walked in there. Wade Phillips did a fantastic job with that defense before him. So it's not like they improved 100% or anything. He just got what Wade Phillips was already getting out of that. So that doesn't convince me that Brandon Staley's a genius. It doesn't make me think that he's going to be a phenomenal head coach. I think he's the most mysterious candidate. I could see the Chargers winning 12 games. I could see them winning 5 games because Staley is in over his head once he's takes over the reins as head coach and not just defensive coordinator. So I think there's some mystery there. I probably would have put him behind Urban Meyer. I know that college coaches don't always succeed when making the jump from college to the NFL, but I think Urban Meyer is the most, distinguished name on that list because he has the most experience. He won multiple national titles. So he's got that kind of Pete Carroll vibe. And we saw what Pete Carroll did making the jump from USC to the Seahawks. And so, and again, these aren't big things. I'd probably drop Brandon Staley to like 28. I'd move Urban Meyer up to the top of the list of coaches who have not coached a year in the NFL yet. But I think for the most part, this is what you do. If you haven't coached a season in the NFL, you can't be high up on the list. And if you're Zach Taylor and you have like the worst starting 3 seasons in the history of the world, I'm just happy Cody didn't rank him last, to be honest. Me and Cody have had our differences. We argued about Andy Dalton. He had him on a list one time. With Zach Taylor, I am at 30, that's almost overranking him. So I'm thrilled that he made the cut at 30.
I'm actually like surprised that you're not defending like Zach Taylor more. I'm not anti Zach Taylor either. I think like he's been in a horrible situation. I mean, you don't plan on losing Joe Burrow for most of the season, but at the same time, the fact is like, this is the NFL. And if you're going into will this be year 3, year 4?
3. This
will be year 3. And I mean, it's going to be tough for them to win. I mean, Breech and I talked about it off air earlier today, but to get to 8 or 9 wins, I mean, I feel like he probably has to do that to come back. And I don't know. That seems to me
he's
like
he's 6-25-1 as a head coach. That's not good. Even in a bad situation, that's not good.
Yeah. No, and that's why he's there. He's at 30. So
if you're averaging 3 wins a year, that's not great. I mean, he's going to get fired if he has 3 wins next year.
And that first year was probably, he goes 2-14 with Andy Dalton as starting quarterback. Well, you know what? Marvin Lewis squeezed 6 wins out of Andy Dalton every year that Dalton was there. So you can't like say, oh, well, he was in quarterback purgatory because he didn't know who he was going to have in 2020. Well, you could have done better in 2-14. So a lot to be desired there. I'm happy with that ranking though, Cody.
And I think too, part of it is we talked about separating the coach from the team, but the reality is that they are coaching the team that they're going to coach next year. And so there's a little bit of power rankings here as well. Like we expect the Texans and the Lions to be the 2 worst teams in football. Ergo, it's going to look like David Culley and Dan Campbell are the 2 worst coaches in football. So I think, and you put the only first year coach you've got above any second year coaches is outside of the Zach Taylor thing is Staley at 24. And it's possible the Chargers are really good because they have a great setup. And if that's the case, Staley's going to shoot up into the top 15 for everybody.
And that's where like their team situations, like they just naturally, like it's impossible for them not to seep in a little bit because like when I'm thinking of Brandon Staley, I'm thinking of, he has Justin Herbert. He has like this setup here in Los Angeles. And yeah, he's not very proven as like he only had that 1 year as a coordinator, but same with Urban Meyer.
In Los Angeles? You just said here in Los Angeles. Was that?
No.
I was like, did you move to Los Angeles?
I thought, I was like, Cody,
that would be an amazing move though. If you were Cody was suddenly in LA, like
and announcing it on the podcast.
Going to visit Colin Coward's show this afternoon.
I am in LA to see Colin.
But no, I was going to say, like, if you were to ask me who am I most confident that's going to jump up, Breech kind of alluded to, like, he talked about Urban Meyer. I think just because of the situation, like, if you think about 3 to 4 years from now in that division, are we sure that, like, 4 years from now, Ryan Tannehill's still going to be there, or Carson Wentz, or, like, he has Trevor Lawrence, and he's still got a lot to prove there, but he's got that track record. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily see Vic Fangio.
Now it's interesting if Aaron Rodgers was suddenly traded to the Broncos, is Vic Fangio the top 20 coach?
Exactly. That's what I mean. If Aaron Rodgers was on the Broncos, but then you're still in a case of like a Mike McCarthy situation where like maybe Mike McCarthy or Vic Fangio keeps your team afloat, but he's never the guy that's taking you to the next level. That's your quarterback, Aaron Rodgers.
And Mike McCarthy's weird because he has a Super Bowl win, right? But it's with a different franchise, and it was a long time ago. And he went 6-10 last year. Dak was hurt. He's a hard guy to place around. Let's move to the middle tier, unless you guys have additional comments on that group of coaches.
I'll just say Mike McCarthy since 2017 is 16-26.
Ew.
Yikes.
That's low heat. I just had his page up. You're right. He went 10-6 in 2016, 7-9, 4-7-1, got fired, and then 6-10. But he did visit PFF once in the offseason.
He what?
He visited PFF.
That's true. That's right.
He did stop by PFF and ask them about passing on first down. So he's got that going. Pete Prisco said he would take Mike McCarthy over Sean McVay in a text exchange with us.
When?
Like last week.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
He said he would take Mike McCarthy over Sean McVay.
Well, and then he tried to like backtrack because this is what Pete does. He flip-flops.
That's the most absurd statement I've ever heard, literally hit football related in the history of my life.
Then he said, well, I would definitely take prime Mike McCarthy over Sean McVay. I was like, what do you mean prime Mike McCarthy?
You mean prime Aaron Rodgers, who was with Mike McCarthy?
Yeah. Did you prime Aaron Rodgers? Yeah. You get prime Aaron Rodgers? That's a little different. Prime Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy is this is what I was yelling about. I'm like, Mike McCarthy's 57. That's fine. That's coaching prime. You don't need to be. He's like, well, Sean McVay is 35. He'll coach forever. Of course, I would take him for the long haul. It's like, oh, so you would take Sean McVay? No, I would take McCarthy, prime McCarthy over McVay. Like, what are you talking about?
Can we get him in here right now to discuss this?
Yell at me. You're not supposed to be talking about the text.
We need to let Prisco do the coaching ranking next year so we can just grill him.
Well, so a few years ago back, this is not totally off topic and tangent related, but we were at the combine. We were at the owners meetings, and we were sitting around. It was me, Lockenfora, and Prisco. I think maybe Jamie Eisenberg was there. I don't think he was though. And we were saying to Pete, like he was like, we were talking ranking Marvin Lewis, in fact. And Pete was like, Marvin Lewis is a great man and a better coach. And we're like, what are you talking about? This guy can't win a playoff game. He's like 20th at best. And Prisco was like, no way. We're like, well, you won't rank the coaches. He's like, I don't. We're like, you're too scared. You don't want them to yell at you. He's like, I will rank them right now. And we will run it tonight. And so we like got him all geeked up. So he ranks the coaches, and they released the rankings on CBSSports.com. And then the next day is like the coach's breakfast. So he's got to go in there.
Oh no.
Yeah. I mean, he was getting some stink eyes from some people. It was pretty fun.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I mean, I think Mike McCarthy, like, at this point, he's probably a little bit more of like a running joke than like I think he does deserve, like, when we look back on it, he'll still be credited with, like, even though Aaron Rodgers did the heavy lifting, like, he still won the title. Yeah. That doesn't mean, like, today there's no, I mean, I argued with Sean about Peterson, and of course Doug Peterson's not even on the list this year, but that's a whole different Sean McVay and Mike McCarthy, I think is different.
We need to see from Mike McCarthy. He just needs to win in Dallas. I mean, if he goes 5-11 or 5-12, I guess 6-11, 8-9, whatever it is, something. So, if he goes below 500 with a full season of Dak, there's a decent chance he gets fired. And then, that totally alters your perception of Mike McCarthy as a head coach in totality of his career.
And there might be some people out there saying, well, we don't know how good Mike McCarthy is because Dak got injured last season. The Cowboys were 1-3 going into the game where Dak Prescott got injured. And then when Dak got injured,
and they should have been 0-4, but the one win was the crazy game against the Falcons.
Right. Exactly. So this isn't like, he couldn't win because he lost Dak. He couldn't win. This was, he had a 250 winning percentage in 4 full games with Dak and one in a miracle game with that one.
I think you're right though. He should win the division. Like that has to, or like get to the playoffs. That has to be, I think you're right. I think that has to happen kind of this year or next if Jerry Jones has a longer leash.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So moving to the middle tier. Controversial.
Ooh.
Start at the bottom. 22, Cliff Kingsbury. 21, Arthur Smith, the first-year head coach. Hello.
Don't forget the teams now.
Oh, sorry. You're right. Good call. Thanks, Cody. Didn't have to read it twice. 22, Cliff Kingsbury, the Cardinals. 21, Arthur Smith of the Falcons. 20, John Gruden of the Raiders. I can see John Gruden. What kind of intern at CBS wrote this crap? I'm John Gruden. 19, Matt Nagy of the Bears, 18, Matt Rule of the Panthers. 17, Ron Rivera of the Washington football team. 16, Brian Flores, Dolphins. 15, Mike Zimmer, Vikings. 14, Mike Vrabel, Titans. 13, Kevin Stefanski, Browns. 12, Frank Reich, Colts. And 11, Kyle Shanahan is not of the 49ers, is not your top 10. Kyle Shanahan? Come on, Cody.
No, I know you don't believe, or do you believe that?
Like Kyle Shanahan's a top 10 coach? Yes.
No. You do. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Kyle Shanahan's like in my top 5, but I do think it would be difficult to move.
I don't care. I don't care. Swap him in at 10. I don't really care. I think that he's just.
You put Mike Tomlin at 11, you were going to have a.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I would. Well, I'd swap some. I'd swap somebody else out. But okay, look at his record so far as the 49ers coach. You ready for this now? 6-10, 4-12, 13-3, 6-10. Now, we talk about injuries and stuff. I mean, and I know he came in and they're doing the rebuild and stuff. But I mean, right now, I'm not saying this is how I view him. But if you're looking at a 4-season stretch, the 13-3 looks like the anomaly. I mean, it is the anomaly of the group. But I mean, I think he's a top 10-ish coach. I mean, I think when his scheme is working, when he's got a healthy supporting cast, it's pretty unstoppable when his offense is working. And I think that they will rebound in a big way. But his career record is under 500. It's under 500. And so no, I believe in Kyle Shanahan. I just think that he got to the Super Bowl, I guess. But I don't know. I still think there's coaches that I would take before him.
And I talked about that with Cody because I think that was one of the things you actually got grilled about a little bit on Twitter was the fact that Shanahan wasn't in the top 10, or maybe it was in our Slack conversation. I think Jared Dubin was saying, look, if you want somebody to out scheme someone, you need to hire Kyle Shanahan because he's got one of the best offensive schemes. But, it kind of goes back to what Bill Parcells said, which is you are what your record says you are. And Kyle Shanahan, like Cody just mentioned, has a losing record in 3 of his 4 seasons. He's 29-35. Mike Vrabel has 29 wins, and he's been a coach a year less than Kyle Shanahan. So he has many wins with 1 fewer year of coaching. He's never had a losing record. He's been in the playoffs 2 or 3 years. And it's not like, Mike Vrabel has a bunch of superstars. It's give the ball to Derrick Henry, hope it works, and it's been working. So, you look at that, and I think you can certainly make the case that Kyle Shanahan doesn't deserve to be in the top 10 just yet. And the funny thing is, if there's one coach right there that should be in the top 10, to me, is Frank Reich.
Oh,
interesting.
He's been in the playoffs 2 times in 3 years. He had to deal with Andrew Luck retiring 2 weeks before the season started, still managed to lead the team to a 7-9 season. He's had 3 different quarterbacks in 3 different years. He's going on his 4th quarterback in 4 years, and yet he still managed to win 28 games, which again, 1 less than Shanahan, but he's coached a full year less. And so I think Frank Reich is probably the most underrated coach on maybe in the NFL, but certainly on Cody's list. But I otherwise that would be, I think the rest of this makes sense, except maybe Arthur Smith, because we talked about having the first year coaches in the bottom rung. So maybe he's a little too high, but I like the rest of it.
Yeah. I was surprised that you said Frank Reich go higher. I think somebody might say he doesn't deserve to be 12, but I think is it possible that Kyle Shanahan is the better game planner or schemer and Frank Reich is the better head coach? I mean, if you just look at those, I don't know. I mean,
those are 2 different things too. And I think people get those mixed up, that it's all, Kyle Shanahan can be the best game planner, but if he can't implement the game plan or is not calling plays at the right time, or, is having some coaching mistakes like we would see with Anthony Lynn and the Chargers, or for whatever reason, you're just choking all the time in the 4th quarter, you can't be at the top of a coaching list. Not that Anthony Lynn's on this, but that's just an example of how a coach completely fails team. So yeah, it's definitely, Shanahan, for whatever reason, has struggled in 3 of his 4 years.
So here's what I would say on that front is that it would be if I'm picking a coach to coach a random lottery ball team, NFL team that spits it out next year, and I want them to get the coach to get the most out of it, I'm taking Kyle Shanahan over Mike Tomlin. I don't know that I would have the stones to rank Kyle Shanahan over Mike Tomlin on a coaches list ranking, because Kyle Shanahan's been to 1 Super Bowl, as you point out, has 3 losing seasons. Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season and has won 2 Super Bowls. Now, granted, it's been a while since he won those, but that's the difficult part of this. I do think there's an easy case to be made that if you're picking, and let's say the Packers, who would you rather have coaching the Packers, Matt LaFleur or Kyle Shanahan? Because the answer is Kyle Shanahan.
Kyle Shanahan.
So that would be my argument. And that if Matt LaFleur, I think he's a good coach. I was wrong about it. I thought he was maybe came out of the Shanahan scheme. But obviously we haven't mentioned him, so he's in the top 10.
Yeah, I didn't mention him because I didn't want to spoil alert, Brinson. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, I know. It's hard to do that. I don't really have any beef. I think the middle section here is really interesting because Cliff Kingsbury at 22, I think you captured the general sentiment about Cliff Kingsbury. He has been flashy and he does cool stuff and he's very handsome. I don't know that his offense is necessarily working. And this is kind of a big year for Cliff Kingsbury coming up.
So he's kind of like Kyle Shanahan, but without any of the actual game planning expertise.
He's handsome. Players love him.
Out west. Yeah. I mean, I think that, a lot of his, they did improve a little bit last year. But so much of it is kind of just, you're watching Kyler Murray chuck it up to DeAndre Hopkins. And I think that he definitely has a lot to prove. I agree. Like Arthur Smith, I think I'm not that big of a believer. I think Arthur Smith can do good things, but I don't know that 21, that's probably a little high for what John Gruden, Matt Nagy, Matt Rule. I don't know. It really depends on your flavor of I'm obviously taking Matt Rule over John Gruden in terms of I'm going to be building a team. I'm probably going to trust the upside there over what John Gruden has shown. And John Gruden's also his personnel decisions, I think, have to be factored in there as well, because
that's the thing with Gruden. You have to bring up the fact that he's the one shopping for the groceries.
Right. Exactly. That's the dinners he's putting out on the table. He's also shopped for those ingredients. And so, Ron Rivera, you've got a bunch of defensive guys right in the middle there, because I think that, again, it doesn't mean you can't be a defensive coach and be a top 10, but to me, a lot of those guys are kind of their teams are often, and Brian Flores still has room to grow, but Ron Rivera, and who else was there? Mike Zimmer. I just think those guys are they're very solid. They're very savvy defensive minds, but I'm not necessarily betting on them to win it all anytime soon.
Ron Rivera's the 3 there, 15, 16, 17, maybe you can lump in Vrabel too. But Zimmer, Flores, and Rivera are just interesting because Flores much younger than the other two guys, but I don't think we know what the Dolphins will be. I mean, the Dolphins were impressive last year, and I think Brian Flores looks like a guy headed on the right path, but you can't launch him into the top 10. I think those are pretty good rankings. Ron Rivera, and Zimmer just feel like their ceilings are capped because of how they operate and, like you say, defense, discipline. They don't want to cut it loose offensively. So, it would take a pretty big season from one of those guys. Although Ron Rivera has been to the Super Bowl, so, give him credit for that. Stefanski, I think, is an interesting name who could jump up into the top 10. Any other thoughts here, Breech, on this grouping?
No, I mean, I told you I thought Frank Reich should be a little bit higher. You hit the nail on the head with Stefanski. I don't think we know enough about him yet. 1 year, you get the Browns to the playoffs, you deserve to be top 15. So I have no problem with that. I actually think Matt Nagy is an interesting case. Not that
a little
ranking,
underrated.
I mean, it does feel like I wouldn't have put him behind Matt Rule, but again, these are such small discrepancies that I don't think it's big enough and really makes a difference. But you're talking about, he's not picking his own groceries. He got handed Mitchell Trubisky. It's not him that chose to take Trubisky over Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. So he got stuck with this quarterback who's average, using the number 2 overall pick. And somehow, he still has this team in the playoffs 2 out of 3 years. He's never had a losing record. And so sometimes I don't think Matt Nagy gets enough credit because he is not making the personnel decisions. He's just going out there coaching his team, and somehow they're making the playoffs almost every year with him.
He's basically an extension for Bears fans and their hatred of Nick Foles, Mitchell Trubisky, and coming soon, Andy Dalton. So, yeah.
I think that, and you can, for instance, I think, if you look at 15, 16, and these are such small things, like Breech said, but Zimmer over Flores, I mean, that's going with the track record over the upside. Whereas Nagy and Rule, we had Matt Rule 1 spot ahead of Nagy. That's going with the upside over the track record. And so it's, again, I think the bigger picture, the best way to look at it is this is a jumble of guys here.
Yeah.
And are they working their way up or not? And so I think with
Nagy, I think it would take a lot for someone from 13 to 22 to crack the top 10.
Stefanski, maybe.
We'd need another Browns playoff run.
Not now, but a year.
Gruden.
I said I thought Frank Reich should be in the top 10 eventually. If the Colts go to the playoffs.
That's why I said 13 to 22. I agree with you on Frank Reich.
Okay.
I think I would have Frank Reich and Kyle Shanahan in my top 10 personally.
I don't think Vrabel should be in the top 10 right now, but I think if they get to another AFC title game, you can certainly make the argument that he deserves to be there because that would be 2 AFC championships in 4 seasons. He's never had a losing record. And he's got that John Harbaugh mentality where they're like, we're going to win the old fashioned way by running the ball 40 times a game and then defense, but they don't have a defense. So that's why he can't get the Super Bowl.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, who did Cody put in the top 10? We will tell you next. The quarterbacks, the top end of this is fairly easy. So we'll start at number 10. 10th, Cody has Mike Tomlin, as we've referenced before, of the Steelers. Number 9, Matt LaFleur, Breech's doppelganger of the Packers. 8, Bruce Arians of the defending Super Bowl champion, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 7, Pete Carroll of the Seahawks. 6, Sean McVay of the Rams. 5, Sean McDermott of the Bills. 4, Sean Payton. Just a little Sean run here. 4, Sean Payton.
A shot at Sean. I mean,
Sean.
Oh my God.
3, John Harbaugh of the Ravens. 2, Bill Belichick, not number 1. Oh, I'm sure that went over well with Patriots fans. And number 1, Andy Reid of the Chiefs. I don't mind it. Andy Reid's been in almost 3 straight Super Bowls, 3 straight AFC
championship. Offsides away from 3 straight Super Bowls.
Yeah, only won one of them, but is I think given what happened in 2020, that it's okay to have Andy Reid over Bill Belichick. What was the biggest piece of feedback you got about this top 10?
It was at 10-1. It was at the bookends here. So Pittsburgh fans, I mean, generally, I think that there is.
So Tomlin was too low at 10?
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is just the small sample size of whoever reached out to me on Twitter, whoever took the article, whatever. So yeah, I think that there's still at least some faction of Steelers fans that they still view Mike Tomlin and understandably so as a top 5 to 7-ish coach because I mean, again, you mentioned that 14 years now and no losing seasons. I mean, so the one thing that Mike Tomlin has going for him is his teams never bottom out. I mean, his teams do not quit. And so if you want to look at like what's a good quality of a head coach, he's always got teams that are invested. But again, where it's close calls, I tend to lean towards like philosophically, where are we moving forward here in 2021 and beyond? Are we building up offensively? I don't necessarily get that with Mike Tomlin. And then they've also tended to fizzle out down the stretch. And since they lost the Super Bowl in 2010, which is a long, I mean, how old was Tom Brady in 2010? That's a long time ago.
It was 11 years ago.
Yeah.
I wasn't working at CBS. That was my first Super Bowl. It was my first year working at CBS.
Yeah, so that's the last time Steelers win the Super Bowl, and since then they've gone 3-6 in the playoffs. And so, they're now the biggest pushback, and I think it's a fair one, was that if you're going to put Mike Tomlin at 10, you need to have Sean Payton like right next to him, because he's a coach that's also like the Saints have always been kind of in the mix, but since they were in the Super Bowl, they've also struggled to advance in the playoffs. They've racked up the wins in the regular season. Again, it's coming down to that philosophical, like, would I rather have Sean Payton as an offensive innovator or Mike Tomlin as like the defensive discipline kind of a thing? And I just went with the former. And so I think I'm not going to be upset if you give me Mike Tomlin as my head coach. And the argument also is like, if the Steelers were to fire Mike Tomlin, people will be lining up at the door to hire him. Yes, I agree. He's a top 10 coach, but I'm not necessarily taking him over some of these other guys.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about bringing up Sean Payton and Mike Tomlin and their postseason record is that John Harbaugh is also in that same boat. Since winning that Super Bowl in 2012, he's 2-4 in the postseason, and if you just look at the past 5 years, he's 1-3. So he's struggled just as much as these other coaches have in the big game. And so, he
was going to get fired in 2017.
But
yeah, exactly.
So my argument for John Harbaugh, though, is that not only has he like been adaptable to build around Lamar Jackson since he came in, but even though the playoff record isn't like we all expect, Lamar Jackson should have been in a Super Bowl by now or something. But since he's had Lamar Jackson, the Ravens have gotten incrementally better. So it's not like they haven't. They
got worse in 2020 compared to 2019, so that's not
well.
better.
I mean, they're
at the end of the season,
35-13 since they drafted Lamar Jackson
with a 1-3 record in the postseason.
Now wait a second.
1-2
last year. You said they got worse in 2020.
I'm talking about statistically, the offense. Lamar Jackson struggled. So, and for all we know, they could take a step back in 2021.
Sure.
Well, Mike Tomlin had no quarterbacks. Ben Roethlisberger got injured, and he had to deal. He did Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges, and somehow he kept that streak alive of not having a losing record. So I just think those are arguments that you can use on multiple coaches. And because I like your list. I thought that making Andy Reid 1 is good. Belichick 2. I think Harbaugh's too high at 3. I think Harbaugh is a top 7 coach. I'm not sure that I'd have him at 3.
Who are you putting at number 3, Breech?
But everybody from 3 through
8,
7. Now I say I'm not. Bruce Arians just won the Super Bowl, but I'm not putting him at 3 because you look at his last, I think, 5 seasons as a head coach. He's had 4 losing seasons and a Super Bowl season with Tom Brady. So, it's if you have 4 out of 5 losing seasons, I'm not putting you in at number 3. So it wouldn't be Bruce Arians, even though I'm fine with him being in the top 10. But I think it would probably be Pete Carroll, Sean Payton. But again, like we just said, those guys have the same arguments against them as John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin. So it's tough. I think that 3rd slot is probably the hardest one to fill. And I was going to say Sean McVay, but Brinson would punch me in the face for playing a favorite to my buddy from Miami. But I honestly think if I had made this list, I'd probably put McVay at 3.
I was going to suggest McVay at 3. I would probably go Sean Payton at 3. I understand, you can talk about the playoff losses all you want. I mean, they suffered 3 of the most back-breaking playoff losses. The Minneapolis Miracle, the Nicole Roby-Coleman thing, and then, the Kyle Rudolph catches touchdown pass from Kirk Cousins in overtime to lose at home. I think if history if the ball bounces a little bit differently for the Saints over the last 4 or 5 years, maybe they have a couple of titles. They drafted so well in that 2017 season, but I mean, he went 7-9 3 straight years before that crazy draft with Kamara and and Lattimore and Ryan Ramczyk boosted them up. So it's really tough. Arians, I agree, and he just won the Super Bowl but I he wouldn't be my third choice if I'm picking coaches. Sean McDermott is really interesting because he has been with the Bills for 4 years. He has one losing season. He's 38-26, so he's almost won 60% of his games with the Bills, a traditionally terrible franchise. And he's been in the playoffs 3 of the 4 years. Now, the first year was a total fluke, but the last 2 years, this is a team that just has gotten better, a lot better under his stewardship. And he works with Brandon Beane. He does some of the grocery shopping as well. Sean McDermott, I don't know if you can put him at 3, but he is really interesting to me. I think in a perfect world, if there wasn't blowback from again, it's hard. You should rank them however you want to rank them, but I would have Reed, Belichick, Peyton, McVay, McDermott, then Kyle Shanahan, and then I would figure it out with Tomlin, Arians, and then probably Bruce Arians because you just won the
Where's
Super Bowl.
John Harbaugh in your top 10?
And then Harbaugh's right there too. I mean, it's
That's
hard.
right.
I think your tiers are good for the most.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't mean to discredit this list because I think that the tier system is maybe that's the better way to do it moving forward. I mean, this is what gets the clicks when people see, I'm 10.
Like Tomlin, 10? What's this guy doing?
Who got snubbed? Yeah.
Right. But I think, the way that we view it, I mean, so many of these guys, like Breech said, they have similar, you could critique them in similar ways because only one coach wins the Super Bowl each year. And so it's a tough thing to do. And so I think, it's a matter of which of these guys do you trust could lead a team to a Super Bowl, if all things were even. And I like with Sean McVay, I think if you look at his record and he's only coached 4 seasons so far, imagine if the offense wouldn't have laid an egg in the Super Bowl, if they beat the Patriots. I mean,
you guys
probably
pulled down by Bill Belichick in that game. So.
Right. And again, so that has to be taken into consideration. But if for whatever reason he won that Super Bowl, I mean, he'd be a lock at number 3, maybe even 2. I mean, because you're talking about the upside, what he's
now on the other hand, where's Kyle Shanahan if he beats Andy Reid and Andy Reid doesn't have a Super Bowl? That changes everything.
Well, I don't know. He's also had several losing seasons. I mean, I get it. You can rack him up. But I think, like you said, when you're saying I'll take anyone from 3 to 7 for number 3, that shows this is the group. It's just a matter of whether you want to pull Frank Reich in, you want to pull Kyle Shanahan in, and include him in this group.
So here's what I would do if I was tiering them instead of ranking them 1 through 32. I would have the top tier. It would be 2 guys, Belichick and Andy Reid. And then my next tier would be Super Bowl winning stalwarts or something like that. And it would be Sean Payton, Pete Carroll, Bruce Arians, Mike Tomlin, and I'm missing somebody there. And then the next one would be young guns. Maybe like Sean McDermott, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, Matt LaFleur, Kevin Stefanski. And then because Frank Reich doesn't have a Super Bowl, so I don't know where. And then you see what I'm saying? Though that's how I think the list is in that list. Your list basically accomplishes that. It's just in a different order, and the 1 through 10 is what's going to get people worked up.
Yeah.
What was it?
Well, then people pull the headlines
was not on the top 10, and Sean McVay was last year. What was the deal? What did Sean do?
I think he actually included him. In the grand scheme of things, it looks very petty now. I mean, it was because Doug Peterson's not on there, but I think the head-to-head between
things, it doesn't look petty. It looks like oh yeah, Doug Peterson got fired. But
right, I think they're head-to-head, and I was arguing, he won more in the big game.
So he had Peterson at 9, McVay at 6, Shanahan at 5. Peyton 4, Harbaugh 3, Reed 2, and Belichick 1. So he only did a top 10 too.
Yeah. But no, that's what gets pulled.
It is things for Eagles fans specifically. Sean McVay is 1 roughly. He's just fired a shot. I don't know if he added that later.
But now Sirianni's way at the bottom. So
and one thing with McVay real quick, and one reason why I don't think number 3 is completely crazy. Although Brinson, I like your Sean Payton aren't even number 3 because in those playoff games you mentioned, he put his team in a position to win, which is what you want a good coach to do. And then, there's weird plays. Losing weird plays, it's difficult to digest, especially when it's a phantom pass interference call or a real pass interference call that didn't get a flag. So I have no problem with Sean Payton at number 3 if you put him there. But you look at McVay. This is a guy who doesn't do his own grocery shopping. He is at the behest of Les Snead, who is doing all the personnel stuff there. And Sean McVay hasn't gotten a first round. They're definitely
not shopping at Whole Foods because they ain't got no first round pick.
Exactly. He has never had a first round pick since he's taken over that job. They didn't have one 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020. They're not going to have one next year. So he's been coaching.
They traded their next 2 first-round picks to get rid of the only first-round pick that was still on the roster.
So he's been coaching kind of shorthanded, not getting this riches that every other team in the NFL gets. And not just for 1 year. It's not like he lost 1 year's first-round pick. He's literally never had one. He's going into his 5th year. And so you take that into account, and he's somehow still winning 10.8 games a year. He's been he beat the Seahawks in the playoffs this year with
John Walford.
With John Walford and Jared Goff finishing with a gimpy thumb, in Seattle. So just some of the things he's done, I think, has been impressive. So I think 3 or 4 would be good for him. But again, overall, it's not easy to rank these coaches. I thought Cody did a pretty good job.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's 1 and 2 are really simple. And, how Belichick does this year will impact whether he's 1 next year or whether he sticks at 2.
Yeah.
I don't think you're moving him unless they win 5 games and then maybe move him down. And then it's largely going to depend on how these teams perform and who can take a leap forward. If Arians backs it up and he and Tom Brady win another Super Bowl, he's got to be 3. If not, I don't know if you make him 2.
I mean, you don't. So with the 1 and 2, you don't take any issue with Andy Reid over Belichick, because I think that was one of the biggest. I think it's just so easy to I acknowledge that Bill Belichick is the greatest of all time, but I don't know. It's hard to separate Patrick Mahomes from Andy Reid, but Andy Reid won a lot before Patrick Mahomes as well. He took Alex Smith to Alex Smith was good right away with him. He won for 12, 14 years in Philadelphia. So the track record is there with him as well. I don't know.
I think with a depleted roster, Andy Reid is more likely to win than Bill Belichick.
Belichick led the Patriots to an 11-5 record in 2008 without Tom Brady. And he took the Cleveland Browns to the playoffs in 1994. If you want to look at pre-Tom Brady,
the Pats could have won 9 games last year and made the playoffs. There were a lot of close games, and they lost Cam Newton to COVID midway through the year. It's a weird season. I don't personally take a whole lot of umbrage with Andy Reid over Bill Belichick. I mean, if you're ranking coaches all time, it's not close. Belichick is way ahead of Andy Reid because of the 6 Super Bowls, plus the other 2 with the Giants. But if you're simply doing coach right now, where they stand right now, I think Andy Reid's ahead of Belichick.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just in the year 2021, if you're rolling those lottery, if you're doing that, I feel like I'd rather get Andy Reid than Bill Belichick. And maybe that's too much recency bias based off of last year and what the Chiefs are doing.
I think Andy Reid's more likely to drag the 2021 Lions or the 2021 Texans to the playoffs or the 2021 Bengals to the playoffs than Bill Belichick is. Now, I would rather have Bill Belichick rebuilding the 2021 Lions, I think, than Andy Reid. But I think just next year coaching, just because you're going to get more. Bill Belichick is going to turn his offense over to somebody else. Andy Reid is going to design the offense and have his fingerprints all over it. And that, to your tiebreaker point, that makes it more likely to I think.
But Belichick's doing that defensively. Reid hands it off to someone else. So it's just kind of the flip side. And I will say, and again, I think Reid at 1 is fine. But if you do look at, the past 5 years in the playoffs, Andy Reid's 6-4, Belichick's 8-2, which is better. And Andy Reid is 0-3 against Belichick all time in the postseason. So, and that's over 2 of those are over the past, I think, 6 years. So that's kind of recent. And then obviously that Super Bowl back in 2004. I
mean, Bill Belichick has won 2 of the last 5 Super Bowls and has been to 3 of the last 5 Super Bowls. So we are certainly putting a lot of weight on 2020 when we do this here, but I don't mind sliding and by him. I definitely love the idea of Bill Belichick reading this and being Cody Benjamin's a dead
and handwriting Cody.
Wow.
Kind but mean email.
It is crazy though when you're going through these stats, because I included the career records and playoff records, and a couple of these guys have Super Bowl records, just going through Andy Reid 1 and 2 in Super Bowls, and just writing out that Bill Belichick is 6-3 in Super Bowls. It's just,
and could easily be 9-0.
Yeah. They were never losses.
Granted, he could be 1-7 too, but or 1-8, I guess. But the loss to the Eagles and the 2 losses to the Giants were really, really close.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. That's any other final thoughts on the coaches rankings here? Good stuff.
It wasn't very we didn't get heated in here. I don't think. It was a very cordial.
Pete Carroll's a weird one too. I'll say that. Pete Carroll's tough because
Seahawks fans hate him.
Seahawks fans hate. So you could but can you really push Pete Carroll out of the top 10? I mean,
he's 112 and 63.
You cannot push Pete Carroll out of the top 10.
Right. Pete Carroll and Mike Tomlin are tough.
His teams are always they're never pleasing anyone. They're very aesthetically unpleasant, I guess. But but it works, I guess. I mean, he's would you compare him to a Mike Tomlin on this list or not?
Yes, I think it's very similar.
Yeah.
It's Mike Tomlin. I think Mike Tomlin and Pete Carroll are the two guys I was thinking of so you're an Eagles fan or Breech, you're a Bengals fan. You get your pick of 4 guys. You can have it. Well, I'm going to say 3 guys for Breech because I know who would take for the third. You can have Pete Carroll, Mike Tomlin, or Kyle Shanahan. Who are you taking?
I'm taking Kyle Shanahan.
See, this is the
and that's the problem because I wouldn't rank. I would have Pete Carroll.
It's hard. You can't possibly rank Kyle Shanahan ahead of Pete Carroll, even though you are 100% of the time taking Kyle Shanahan over Pete Carroll.
And that's what makes the ranking so difficult is that we have this on-field evidence that, Pete Carroll has been much more successful in his coaching career than Kyle Shanahan.
So is it fair to say though, because are we all just a little bit too brainwashed with the idea of Kyle Shanahan
I think it depends on your team too. Cause if I'm the Titans, I'm in Nashville right now, I would take Pete Carroll over Kyle. I think Pete Carroll, that would be his dream offense, having Derrick Henry but as a Bengals guy with Joe Burrow and all those receivers, I want Kyle Shanahan.
Well, I was going to ask Cody, who would you rather have? You get to pick between Pete Carroll, Mike Tomlin, Kyle Shanahan, and Sean McVay. Who are you taking?
I go with Sean McVay.
Okay. I knew Breech would take McVay, so I didn't want to give him.
Oh, yeah. But
all right,
I think it is
out. Who would you go with? Tomlin, Carroll, or Shanahan?
My thought too was Breech. I'm leaning towards Shanahan, and I don't know if it's why my own brain is
he's a really good coach.
I know, but the record, we were talking about, is am I just?
He got there. He didn't have a quarterback, and then he traded for a quarterback. The quarterback tore his ACL. And then the quarterback was healthy for 16 games. They went to the Super Bowl.
Carroll didn't have a quarterback when he got to Seattle. He made the playoffs in 2010 and had one of the biggest upsets with the Beastquake.
Pete Carroll's worst season as a head coach of the Seahawks is 9-7.
And he went 7-9 in 2010, but they made the playoffs.
Oh, right. Sorry. Yeah, that's right.
I just wonder, and I'm with my response. Let's say the Eagle, all the coaches are free, and the Eagles announce tomorrow they're hiring Kyle Shanahan. That is getting me more excited than saying we hired Pete Carroll or Mike Tomlin. But I do wonder, is there a little too much Twitter bowing down to the idea of Kyle Shanahan that's seeping in there? Because do I just love the idea of this offensive genius, and yet Breech is the record, he went 13-3, went to a Super Bowl, but in 3 of those 4 seasons, he's not like you said, Carroll's worst season doesn't even come to that. So I don't know.
Eagles fans would be.
And Tomlin, again, we've said it 1,000 times, has never had a losing record. And Shanahan has literally had a losing record 75% of the time.
And yet it's not taking me that long to pick Shanahan. Is it just because of the philosophy of where the NFL's going? We trust that Kyle Shanahan can scheme his way out of something rather than Mike Tomlin can, put together defensive masterpiece. I don't know.
I agree. That's what makes this list tough. You did a good job. Let's get out of here. Cody, as always, thanks, buddy. Keep up the great work. Hope your Twitter mentions stay clean, and Breech, I'm sure we'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.